CEO sees homeless man eating garbage, but instead of helping, decides to do something cruel. Richard Sterling had built his fortune on the simple principle that weakness deserved no mercy. As CEO of Sterling Financial Group, one of the most powerful investment firms on Wall Street, he had clawed his way to the top through ruthless calculations and an unwavering belief that success was reserved for those strong enough to seize it. On this particular Tuesday morning in December, as his chauffeur drove him to his Manhattan office, Richard was about to encounter a situation that would reveal the true depths of his cruelty. The traffic light turned red at the intersection of Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street, and Richard's attention was drawn to a figure hunched over a garbage can outside a McDonald's restaurant. The man was clearly homeless. His clothes were tattered, his hair unkempt, and he was desperately digging through the trash, pulling out half-eaten hamburgers and cold French fries. Most people would have felt a pang of sympathy, maybe even compassion. Richard felt something entirely different. "Look at that pathetic creature," Richard muttered to his driver, a disdainful smile playing at his lips. "Eating garbage like some kind of animal. That's what happens when you don't have the strength to make something of yourself." The homeless man, whose name was David Martinez, was a 45-year-old former accountant who had lost everything when his wife died of cancer 3 years earlier. The medical bills had consumed his savings, the grief had cost him his job, and a series of unfortunate circumstances had left him on the streets. But Richard didn't know David's story, and more importantly, he didn't care. All he saw was an opportunity. "Stop the car," Richard commanded suddenly, his eyes gleaming with malicious inspiration. "I want to have a little fun with this vagrant." Richard stepped out of his limousine, his $5,000 suit impeccable, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the sidewalk as he approached David. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been starker, one representing the pinnacle of success, the other the depths of despair. But what Richard was about to do would reveal which man truly occupied the moral depths. "Excuse me," Richard said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I couldn't help but notice you're having a meal. Mind if I join you?" David looked up, startled and embarrassed. His face flushed with shame at being caught eating from the garbage. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just ... I haven't eaten in 2 days. I'll move along." "Oh, no need for that," Richard said, pulling out his phone and discreetly starting to record. "I'm actually quite interested in your dining choices. Tell me, how does the garbage taste? Is it seasoned to your liking?" David's face burned with humiliation as Richard continued his cruel mockery. But what the homeless man didn't know was that Richard's twisted entertainment was about to escalate into something far more sinister. Richard had decided that this encounter would become content for his social media accounts, where he regularly posted about lifestyle motivation and success principles to his 2.3 million followers. "You know what?" Richard said, his voice taking on a tone of mock generosity. "I'm feeling charitable today. I'm going to give you a choice. I'll give you $1,000 cash right now. Or," he paused dramatically, pulling out a fresh sandwich from a nearby deli, "you can have this perfectly good sandwich. But there's a catch." David's eyes widened with desperate hope. $1,000 could get him a motel room for weeks, proper meals, maybe even help him get cleaned up enough to look for work. "What's the catch, sir?" Richard's smile turned predatory. "The catch is simple. If you want the $1,000, you have to continue eating from that garbage can for the next 10 minutes while I film it. You have to tell my social media followers how grateful you are for the opportunity to eat trash, and how people like you don't deserve better." The cruelty of the proposition hit David like a physical blow. Richard wasn't just asking him to degrade himself. He was asking him to participate in his own public humiliation for the entertainment of millions of strangers. A sandwich sat there, representing dignity and simple human kindness, while the money represented survival at the cost of his soul. "I know what you're thinking," Richard continued, his phone now openly recording. $1,000 is a lot of money for someone in your position. All you have to do is admit what you really are: a failure, a burden on society, someone who deserves to eat garbage because you're too weak to earn real food. David's hands trembled as he looked between the sandwich and the cash Richard held. He thought about his late wife, Maria, and how she had always believed in human dignity. She had been a social worker who dedicated her life to helping people like him, people who had fallen through society's cracks. What would she think of him now? "Sir," David said quietly, "I may be homeless, but I'm still a human being. I don't deserve to be treated like this." Richard laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humanity. "Deserve? You're eating garbage. You've already proven what you deserve. I'm just offering to pay you for the entertainment value. Think about it. When will you ever have another chance to make this much money?" The small crowd that had gathered watched in horrified fascination as they witnessed this real-time display of human cruelty. Some people began recording on their own phones, but not to support Richard's mockery. They were documenting what they recognized as a profound moral failing. "I'll tell you what," Richard said, enjoying the power he held over David's desperation. "I'll sweeten the deal. $2,000. All you have to do is eat from that garbage can and tell my followers that poor people like you are just too lazy to work. Easy money for someone who's already doing it anyway." David Martinez stood at a crossroads that would define not just his immediate future, but his fundamental sense of self-worth. The money Richard offered represented more than financial relief. It was survival itself. $2,000 could mean the difference between living and dying on the streets during the harsh winter months ahead. But accepting it would require him to participate in his own dehumanization before an audience of millions. "I need to think about this," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard's expression showed no patience for contemplation. "Think about what? You're already eating garbage. I'm just offering to pay you for it. Most people in your situation would jump at this opportunity." As David wrestled with his decision, neither man noticed that the crowd around them had grown significantly. Among the onlookers was Jennifer Walsh, a journalist for the New York Times, who had been walking to a coffee meeting when she witnessed Richard's cruel proposition. She had recognized him immediately. Richard Sterling was a public figure, a man who regularly appeared on financial news programs, preaching about personal responsibility and success. Jennifer began recording the interaction, recognizing that she was witnessing something that would have significant implications for Richard's public image and business empire. She watched as David struggled with a decision that no human being should have to make. "You know what your problem is?" Richard continued, his voice growing more aggressive. "You think you're entitled to dignity. You think society owes you something. But dignity is earned, not given. And you haven't earned anything except the right to eat garbage." David's eyes filled with tears, but not from self-pity. He was crying for what humanity had become, for the cruelty that success could breed, for the way society had failed both him, and a different way, Richard Sterling. "Sir," David said, straightening his shoulders despite his tattered clothes, "I used to be an accountant. I had a house, a wife, a life. I lost everything when my wife died of cancer, and the medical bills destroyed us. I didn't choose this life, but I'm still choosing how to live it." Richard's laugh was harsh. "Sob story. Everyone has excuses. The difference between winners and losers is that winners don't make excuses. They make money. So what's it going to be? Take the money and admit what you are, or walk away and stay hungry." The moment stretched between them like a chasm. David looked at the money again, then at the sandwich, then at the crowd of people watching this moral drama unfold. He thought about Maria, about the values she had taught him, about the kind of man he had been before tragedy struck. "I'll take the sandwich," David said finally, his voice growing stronger. "And I don't want your money." Richard's expression shifted from amusement to anger. "You're making the wrong choice. That sandwich will last you one meal. This money could change your life." "No, sir," David replied, accepting the sandwich with dignity. "Taking your money would have changed who I am. And I've already lost everything else. I won't lose myself, too." Richard Sterling's face darkened as he realized his entertainment had been ruined by David's unexpected display of dignity. The homeless man's refusal to participate in his own degradation had transformed what Richard intended to be a humorous social media post into something that made him look like a villain. "You're going to regret this decision," Richard said, his voice cold with fury. "You could have had $2,000, but your pride is more important than your survival. Let's see how your dignity keeps you warm tonight." But David had already turned away, clutching the sandwich that represented something far more valuable than money, his self-respect. As he walked away, Richard made a decision that would prove to be the biggest mistake of his life. "Fine," Richard called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But don't expect any sympathy from me when you're still eating garbage tomorrow. People like you deserve exactly what you get." Richard then did something that would haunt him for months to come. He posted the video anyway, but with a twisted narrative. He edited the footage to make it appear as though David had been ungrateful for his generous offer, and he added commentary about how homeless people were too proud to accept help, too lazy to work. The video went live on Richard's social media accounts at 10:47 a.m. with the caption, "Encountered a homeless man today who chose pride over survival. This is why these people stay on the streets. They'd rather eat garbage than accept help with conditions." Perfect example of the entitlement mentality that keeps people poor. Within hours, the video had thousands of views, but the response was not what Richard expected. Jennifer Walsh, the journalist who had witnessed the entire encounter, had also posted her own video, one that showed the full context of Richard's cruel proposition. Her video revealed the complete story: Richard's mockery, his demand that David degrade himself for money, and David's dignified refusal. The contrast between the two videos was stark. Richard's edited version made him appear generous, while Jennifer's complete footage revealed him as a cruel predator who had attempted to exploit a vulnerable person for entertainment. The hashtag Richard Sterling Exposed began trending on social media within 6 hours. Dr. Sarah Chun, a psychology professor at Columbia University, shared Jennifer's video with her own commentary. "This is not generosity. This is sociopathic behavior." Richard Sterling attempted to purchase a human being's dignity and then punished him for refusing to sell it. The backlash was swift and overwhelming. Richard's company, Sterling Financial Group, began receiving thousands of angry calls and emails. Business partners started questioning their associations with him. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss the crisis, but Richard, insulated by his wealth and power, initially dismissed the criticism as jealousy from less successful people. He couldn't understand why his lesson about personal responsibility was being misinterpreted as cruelty. The corporate fallout from Richard's video was swift and devastating. Within 48 hours, Sterling Financial Group had lost 3 major clients, representing over $50 million in assets under management. The company's stock price dropped 12% in 2 days as investors fled from the negative publicity. Richard's board of directors demanded an immediate meeting to discuss his future with the company. "Richard, this is a disaster," said Patricia Williams, the board's lead director. "Our clients are abandoning us, our reputation is in ruins, and you're trending on social media as a villain. You need to fix this immediately." Richard, still convinced he had done nothing wrong, was defiant. "I offered that man money. More money. And he'd probably see in a year. If he was too proud to take it, that's his problem, not mine." "You offered him money to humiliate himself on camera," Patricia replied. "Don't you understand how this looks? You're a millionaire CEO mocking a homeless person. This isn't about business philosophy. This is about basic human decency." The meeting grew heated as board members expressed their concerns about Richard's judgment and the company's future. Several major investors had already indicated they would be pulling their funds if Richard remained as CEO. Meanwhile, David Martinez was experiencing a different kind of attention. Jennifer Walsh's article about the encounter had gone viral, and people from around the world were reaching out to help him. A GoFundMe campaign, started by a stranger, had raised over $100,000 in donations. Job offers were pouring in from companies who had been impressed by his dignity under pressure. "I never expected this," David told Jennifer during a follow-up interview. "I just couldn't let him pay me to hate myself. My wife always said that our dignity is the one thing no one can take away from us unless we give it to them." The story had captured international attention, with news outlets from around the world covering the contrast between Richard's cruelty and David's dignity. David found himself being interviewed by major networks, sharing his story of loss, homelessness, and the choice he had made to preserve his self-respect. Richard, watching the coverage from his luxury office, felt a growing sense of panic. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had expected to be praised for his tough love approach, not vilified as a monster. He began to realize that his actions had consequences he hadn't anticipated. The final blow came when Sterling Financial Group's biggest client, a pension fund representing 50,000 teachers, announced they were terminating their contract. The fund spokesperson said, "We cannot, in good conscience, continue to do business with someone who shows such callous disregard for human dignity." 6 months after the incident, Richard Sterling stood in his now empty office, packing the last of his belongings. The board of directors had voted unanimously to remove him as CEO, and the company had rebranded itself to distance from his toxic reputation. His personal brand was destroyed, his business empire crumbled, and he faced multiple lawsuits from investors who claimed his actions had damaged their financial interests. But the most profound change wasn't in Richard's financial situation. It was in his understanding of what had actually happened that December morning. Months of therapy, mandated as part of his severance agreement, had forced him to confront the reality of his actions. "I thought I was teaching him a lesson about success," Richard said to his therapist, Dr. Michael Roberts. "I thought I was showing him what happens when you choose pride over practical survival." "And what do you think now?" Dr. Roberts asked. "I think I was the one who needed to learn a lesson," Richard replied. "I had confused cruelty with strength, exploitation with generosity. I had become so disconnected from my own humanity that I couldn't recognize it in others." David Martinez, meanwhile, had used the donations and job offers to rebuild his life. He had found stable housing, steady employment, and had become an advocate for homeless rights. He often spoke about the encounter with Richard, but not with bitterness, with understanding. "I don't hate Richard Sterling," David said during a speaking engagement at a homeless services conference. "I feel sorry for him. He was more spiritually hungry than I was physically hungry. I was just eating garbage to survive. He was feeding his soul with cruelty." Richard had attempted to reach out to David multiple times, wanting to apologize and possibly find some path to redemption. David had agreed to meet with him, but not for his own benefit. He understood that Richard needed forgiveness more than he needed to give it. The meeting took place at a homeless shelter where David now volunteered. Richard arrived expecting to find the same desperate man he had encountered months earlier. Instead, He found someone who had been transformed by kindness and opportunity into an advocate, a speaker, and a symbol of human resilience. "I'm sorry," Richard said simply. "I was wrong. I was cruel. I don't know how to fix what I did." David looked at the man who had once tried to buy his dignity. "You can't fix what you did, but you can choose to be different going forward. You can choose to see people as human beings deserving of respect, not as entertainment or objects for your amusement." Richard nodded, understanding that his path to redemption would be long and difficult. He had lost his business empire, but he had gained something more valuable, the possibility of becoming a better human being. The story of Richard Sterling and David Martinez became a case study in business schools and ethics courses around the world. It demonstrated how quickly success could turn into failure when it was built on a foundation of cruelty and disconnection from human values. In the end, the man who had tried to buy dignity learned that it couldn't be purchased. It could only be earned through compassion, humility, and the recognition that every human being deserves respect regardless of their circumstances. If this story moved you and reminded you that true success is measured not by wealth, but by how we treat others, especially those who can do nothing for us, then please subscribe to our channel. We share stories like this every week, real accounts of moral choices, human dignity, and the power of kindness to transform lives. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that believes in the fundamental worth of every human being.